This lesson we're going to base on our pamphlet, The Rose. And there are two styles in this lesson. The right one is the fine line. We also call Gong-bi style. And then sometimes they call meticulous style. On the left one is Hsieh-I style. Two styles are very different based on the paper and brushes. To make our lesson a little bit simpler, we'll use the same color. On the Gong-bi fine line style, we started with a drawing, and then we use a sized Shuen paper
Hi, Cody. Can you wave to the camera?
Shimmer Shuen.
Was that you talking in the background while Popo
And the
was painting?
first step we'll be doing is we will
Can you say hi to everybody out there?
draw the rose with medium ink. Red feather brush small. The line work is very important because it shows the shape of the subject as well as the texture of the subject. And we will be using red feather small for the line work. Start with a drawing like this underneath. As you get more advanced, you can draw directly on the sized Shuen paper. But for beginners, we'll use this as a guide underneath the sized paper. And then we put our sized paper right above it. We will be using the green cap fine line ink. We choose this particular ink because it has a higher glue content. So when we wet mount, it will be much more stable. And then we put a couple drops in this white dish and dilute it to the medium strength. The line work is very important because it shows the texture of the subject as well as the shape. It's very important when you do the line work. A lot of beginners have a tendency lay the brush to the paper slanted, but we want to make sure the brush is always 90 degrees to the paper. So we started with a little bit pressure. So the starting point, the line is a little bit heavier. And as we go into the turning, and then we get thinner and then heavier and then thinner and heavier. So it's not like a pencil line. So there is thick and thin. So we usually, it's called nail head and mouse tail. The calyx and then the flower, the stroke usually are thinner because they are softer. And then the stem and the branch and the leaf usually is a heavier line. Okay, the line work is done. Then we want to wait until it dry. Then we'll do the shading. The flower, we have 3 different color. We have yellow chunk, that all the color are pretty diluted. So there's enough moisture to pull the color. We have yellow and we have vermilion chip. These are all from a dish that we pour into the flower dish and make it diluted color. If it's too thick, you just add a little bit water to it. Make sure that you can pull. And then the third color for the flower is we use the gouache Da Vinci white. So all the fine line color are very diluted. So you can see the texture is very watery. And then we use 2 brushes. One is applying the color and one is pulling. So the first layer, we usually start from the dark to the light. So the first layer of the color is we use vermilion. And we use 1 brush to apply the color, 1 brush to pull. It's very important the moisture of the brush. Also, not too wet because then you have puddle on your area. And then not too dry because if it's too dry, you can't pull. So I'll start it with the bigger petal so you can see. So essentially we are using the vermilion to shade this flower petal. So after we apply the color, we soften the edge with a clean brush.
Is that what you mean by pulling?
Yes. So after each time when you soften it, you use a paper towel to clean your brush. So your brush will be clean at all times. One of the very important thing is when you soften the edge, you literally it's the edge. If you get too deep, then your color just becomes muddy.
So you're switching off between two brushes. One brush is applying the color, and the other brush pulls the color from the edges to soften the transition of the color to the white space.
That's exactly right.
So applying color, and then switching brushes to the clean brush, and then pulling the color.
So when you pull, make sure you don't get any deeper just than the edges. So a lot of beginners' mistake is that they get into the middle of the area, and then you can see that it becomes very messy.
And this technique is possible because you're using fully sized paper.
That's correct.
So the color is non-absorbent, and it allows you to sort of pull it and manipulate it after you apply it.
So the vermilion is done. You can see it's very light. And we have the option, once it's dry, we'll go on the top of it to do second and third layer, same color, just to get the intensity of it. But the only way you can do it is when it's dry. Otherwise, then you lose all the cleanness of the shape. Now we're going to do the leaves. The leaves, the first layer is light ink. So what we do is we got the line ink into another area. Just make sure that it's being diluted.
So you're taking that medium ink that you used for the line work, and you're taking some of it and putting it in your flower plate, and then you're going to add water to it to make it a light ink.
Right. And we start shading the leaf from the vein to outside. And you can see this shape of leaf have one area is bigger and one area is smaller. So on the bigger one, that we don't apply the ink right at the edge of the line. What we do is we leave a line called water line. This way, will give a third dimension of the petal.
So you're leaving like a hair space line between where you apply the color and the outline.
That's correct. And then the other side of vein, we apply it close to the, right at the line of the vein.
So on the short side, the color is going all the way to the edge.
Right. On the second leaf, again, we leave a hairline on the larger area. And start it from the vein. And then one more time, only soften on the edge, only pulling on the edge. I never go deeper. And then the next area is right on the line. The third leaf the same way. We leave a water line on the larger side. Pulling. And then the small side, we apply right at the edge. Okay, we'll wait until it's dry. Okay, I did the first layer of vermilion, and I decided the tone is too light to accent the depth of the flower I wanted. So now I'm adding the second layer. So it depends on how diluted your color. You can do 2 to 3 or 4 layers of the same color, but each layer has to wait until the other layer is dry. So now I'm doing the second layer. And then you can just do it right on the top of the first time. Again, I can't emphasize enough. Every time when you apply the color and then you pull, you do not get into the deeper than just the edge of it. So you pull the edge.
And every time you pull the brush away, you're actually switching brushes and pulling with the clean brush.
And then as you're pulling with the clean brush, you also use a paper towel to take excess the color. So make sure your clean brush
Stays clean.
stays clean. Okay, so while we're waiting for the vermilion to dry, I use, the Hsieh-I style. I have a light green and a dark green, and then also indigo to finish my leaf. So the first step, I'm going to apply the indigo over the leaves that I did the ink wash. So this time, I don't need to worry about the waterline that I talk about. I just wash it right above it. So I apply the indigo from the center of the leaf to where outside. And then I soften the edge.
So these fine soft brushes that you're using for the filling, they're relatively inexpensive. Do you recommend that people have more of them to work with lighter and darker colors?
Yes, I would recommend minimum 2 of the color to the brush to apply the color, because the ink usually settle on the base of the brush. It's hard to completely get it out. So when you use the ink brush and then later on to do the other color, sometimes it gets muddy. Again, if budget is not an issue, I would at least get 3 or 4 of them used for different color. So while you're working on it, you don't have to clean the brush each time.
And when you say 3 or 4, do you mean 3 or 4 sets? Like one for applying and one for pulling? Or the pulling brush can be the same for all of them?
The pulling brush can be one, and then all the other brushes are for different ink and color applying, because assume that your pulling brush can stay relatively clean. This is what my 2 brushes look like. You can see the pulling brush is stay pretty clean.
Yeah.
And then the other brush that I have ink set in there, and they have different colors.
Okay.
So now while we're waiting for the vermilion to dry, I'm going to do the next step. So I'm using the color brush to use light ink. Light green to wash the calyx from the base to the tip. You can see that my green is pretty light. So I have the option after it's all dry, and I can put the second layer in. And then on the very right leaves have the back leaves. So I also use this light green to apply it to the back of the leaves. Okay, then we'll wait and it's all dry. Then we'll do the second layer. Okay, now we are doing the next layer of the flower petal, which is Chinese yellow, again in very diluted. So we are applying from the base of the petal a little bit more than the vermilion layer.
Is it a general principle to lay lighter colors over darker colors?
Yes.
So there you're applying.
Over the vermilion.
And then you're switching, and then around the edges you're pulling the color.
Right. Okay, now I'm going to get to the leaf part. So we have a dark green that I'm start washing over the indigo part and then towards the end of the leaf edges.
So once again, you're applying, and then switching brushes and pulling.
Correct.
And like the flower, you're now applying a lighter color over the previous color, which is darker.
Right.
So the layers on the leaves went light ink, indigo, and then dark green.
That's correct. The way how the dark green looks, I might add, after it's dry, I might add another layer. Okay, so the next step on the flower petal, I used Da Vinci gouache white and made a very diluted white. And I applied this white. So you can see that my brush wasn't cleaning enough. So I'm going to start it over. And that's why at this point it's helpful if I had another cleaner brush. So the best way I would say that the thickness is like milk. So the only place I'm going to apply this white is on the two large petals of the flower on the far edge away from the yellow and vermilion. And then I will wash it towards yellow and vermilion. The way of this painting so far, I'm looking at it. Once it's dry, I will apply the light green over the calyx and the stem one more time because it's right now it looks too light. And I apply the dark green toward the leaf one more time. And that'll be it. We are doing a rose with two brushes, Flow and Orchid Bamboo. Now we're preparing the colors.
And this is going to be for the Hsieh-I or the spontaneous style.
That's correct. We use red chips, wet, Winsor Newton watercolor, Elysian Crimson, and we squish a good portion into the dish, and then we use the wet chip red to mix. And leave the color to be pasty. And then we use the Da Vinci gouache white. And add the water so it will become a kind of milk consistency. And then the mixing brush I had the red and Elysian Crimson mixture. So I'm using it to mix this color. Then I will get a milky consistency. So this is my pink.
So you have a pasty, sort of dark red, which is a mixture of Chinese chip red and Winsor Newton Elysian Crimson. And then you have a diluted Da Vinci white gouache that you use the same mixing brush, so drawing some of that red and Alizarian crimson into the white to make sort of a more diluted pink.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I will mix the leaves later on, so we don't get too many things at the same time. So we do the flower right now. So we use flow brush, wet it, and then dip into our red mixture, and then soften the tip up in the middle of the flower dish. And then we'll do the 5 petals, the center of 5 petals. Then on the outside petal, I first dip my brush into the pink mixture. And then I soften I kind of rinse the tip a little bit, and then goes into the red mixture, and then blend. So then I'm going to do the outside petal. So this is the flower for the rose. So now we are making the color for the leaves. So we have Chinese yellow in a jar. And then we add indigo, which we have an option of Winsor Newton indigo tube in a dish, or Chinese indigo chip. Either one will work. So we'll use the Winsor Newton indigo tube blue indigo. So we use indigo, add a little yellow, make into a dark green.
So this jar of yellow was a dry chunk that you added some water to and just let it melt overnight.
Yes. And then we get this dark green into the next dish. And add yellow, make into a light green. So now we have 2 green. So we use Orchid Bamboo brush for the leaves. We first dip into the light green. And then the dark green. light green, dark green, and blend. We can load it twice and blend. And then leaf 2. And leaf 3. So after this, we're going to do the stem. And then the stem we use Happy Doll. And we mix light green with dark green and blend, tip with red. So we followed the center of the flower, goes 1, 2, and then the color is getting too light, so I'm loading again. 3. And then I use the same brush, load the green, both green, and then tip the red. And then this time I'm going to connect with the leaf with the center of the branch. And then I clean my brush and dry it. And this way I use the pasty red, and I do the little needle. That's it.